It was supposed to be an ordinary night in the deep south, thunder rolling over the bayou, rain pelting rooftops, and a man driving home after another long shift. But when Eli Turner stepped out of his truck that night, he didn't expect to find his world collapsing on his own front porch. There, under the flickering light, lay Rexy, his old German shepherd, his once fearless K9 partner, trembling, her belly swollen, her eyes pleading for help. The storm drowned out everything except the sound of her shallow breathing. Eli's heart stopped. This was the dog who had taken a bullet for him years ago, the one who had dragged him from danger when he'd lost all hope. And now, she was the one fighting for her life. As lightning split the sky, Eli wrapped her in his jacket, whispering through the rain, "You saved me once, girl. Now it's my turn." He had no idea that what awaited them at the small roadside clinic would become a night the town would never forget. A night where love was measured not in words, but in heartbeats. The Louisiana night was split open by thunder. Rain hammered the tin rooftops of Bayou Verdant like 1,000 frantic fists, turning the dirt roads into glistening rivers of red clay. Power lines hissed above the flooded fields, sparks flashing blue-white in the distance. Eli Turner gripped the steering wheel of his battered Ford, wipers slapping back and forth with a hopeless rhythm. He'd been out since sunset repairing a downed line near the edge of town, the kind of job only someone stubborn or heartbroken would take on in weather like this. The dashboard clock blinked 12:47 a.m. Eli's shoulders ached beneath his soaked denim jacket, the smell of ozone and wet earth clinging to him. He was bone-tired, but the thought of his old partner waiting on the porch always drew a faint smile. Rexy never slept when he was working late. Even retired, she treated every creak of the gate like a duty call. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the sagging power poles and the faint outline of his farmhouse at the end of the gravel road. Relief loosened his grip for half a heartbeat. Then the beam of his headlights caught something that made his stomach drop. Rexy wasn't standing. She was lying there on the porch boards, motionless in the rain. Her fur was plastered to her body, her great chest heaving in shallow, uneven waves. Eli slammed the truck door so hard it bounced back, stumbling up the steps. "Rexy!" he shouted, but the storm swallowed his voice. Up close he saw the truth. Her belly was swollen, rigid with strain. Her eyes, those once sharp amber eyes, were glazed with pain. She tried to lift her head, tail giving the faintest twitch, but collapsed with a whimper that sliced straight through him. Eli dropped to his knees, rainwater pooling around them, hands trembling as he touched her muzzle. "Easy now. I'm here, girl," he whispered. Her breath rattled, hot and shallow against his palm. The porch light flickered overhead. Eli's mind reeled. She'd gone into labor. He'd noticed her restlessness earlier that afternoon, but thought it was nerves from the thunder. Now the contractions had gone on too long. He'd seen this once before on a farm job years ago. When the pups couldn't come, the mother's body began to shut down. "No, no, no, not you." His voice broke. He pressed his ear to her side and felt faint movement inside, like trapped heartbeats fighting through silence. Still alive, but barely. A gust of wind rattled the shutters, lightning flaring again. For an instant the world went white, and in that flash he saw her not as she was now, but as she'd been years ago. The night of the warehouse raid. Eli had been a junior officer then, green and reckless, chasing a suspect into the dark. A gun went off. He remembered the heat, the ringing in his ears, and then Rexy leaping between him and the muzzle flash. The bullet had grazed her shoulder, but she never made a sound. She'd dragged him back to safety by his vest strap, bleeding all the way. That night, he'd promised her, "As long as I breathe, you'll never face the dark alone." Now the memory burned behind his eyelids as thunder rolled again, shaking the porch. He pressed his forehead against her damp fur. "You saved me once, girl," he murmured. "You don't quit now." Rexy's body tensed, a low groan escaping her throat. The muscles in her abdomen rippled, then fell still. She was trying to push, but nothing happened. Eli could feel panic clawing at his chest. The nearest 24-hour vet was miles away, down Highway 19, across the flooded bridge. He looked at his truck through the curtain of rain. The road would be hell, but staying here meant losing her. He slid his arms under her, straining against her weight. She was heavy, 75 pounds of muscle gone limp, but he lifted her anyway, cradling her like something holy. Her head lolled against his shoulder, eyes fluttering. "Hang on, partner," he whispered. "We're not done yet." The storm screamed around him as he staggered down the steps. Mud sucked at his boots, rain blinding him. He managed to yank open the truck's back door and lay her across an old blanket. She whimpered once, a small, pitiful sound that ripped through the roar of rain. He climbed into the driver's seat, breath ragged, heart hammering like the wipers. Lightning forked over the bayou, turning the flooded road into a mirror of fire. He slammed the gear shift, tires spinning before catching traction. The Ford lurched forward, water spraying like shattered glass. "Stay with me, Rexy," he said, glancing in the rearview mirror. Her sides rose unevenly. The storm answered with another crash of thunder. For 20 endless minutes, he drove through sheets of rain, the headlights cutting tunnels of light through the darkness. Every bump in the road made Rexy whimper, and each sound felt like a clock ticking towards something irreversible. He kept talking to her, about the old days, about how proud he was, about the time she chased off a gator from the yard. Anything to keep her hearing his voice. "You're the toughest girl I know," he muttered. "You made it through bullets and hurricanes. You can make it through this." The sign for Bennett Veterinary Clinic loomed ahead, half-lit, swaying on its hinges. Relief nearly made him sob. He pulled into the gravel lot too fast. The truck fishtailed before stopping in a spray of mud. He jumped out, rain pelting his face like needles. He opened the rear door and gathered her in his arms again. Her head lolled, breath shallow. "I've got you," he whispered. "Hold on, soldier." The wind tore at his jacket as he climbed the steps to the clinic door. His boots slipped on the wet boards, but he didn't stop. He shouldered through the entrance with a crash, the bell above the frame clanging wildly. Warm light spilled across the lobby. The smell of antiseptic and hay met him like a wave. Behind the counter, a sleepy nurse gasped, frozen for half a second as she took in the sight. Eli soaked to the bone, clutching a dying dog. "Please," he rasped, voice raw. "She's been in labor all night. She's fading." The nurse spun toward the hallway. "Dr. Bennett, emergency!" Somewhere deeper in the clinic, footsteps hurried closer. Eli looked down at the German shepherd lying limp in his arms, her paw twitching against his chest. The storm outside bellowed like some great animal, thunder rumbling through the floorboards. He bent close, whispering into her ear one last promise before help arrived. "You saved me once, girl," he said softly, his voice breaking in the din, the rain. "Now it's my turn." The door burst open with the sound of splintering wind. Rain and grit followed Eli Turner inside, the gust slamming the door against the wall as lightning flared behind him. In his trembling arms, Rexy hung limp, her fur slick with mud, her belly swollen and hard beneath his soaked jacket. He could barely catch his breath, his chest heaving from the drive and the fear gripping his heart. The small clinic was half lit. A single lamp glowing near the counter, soft country music humming faintly from an old radio. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint sweetness of hay from the back kennels. A young nurse looked up, her eyes widening in shock. "Help!" Eli gasped, staggering toward the counter. She's dying." The nurse's chair screeched backward. "Dr. Bennett! Emergency in the front!" Her voice trembled as she rushed around to clear the table. From the hallway, the sound of quick footsteps echoed. Dr. Laura Bennett appeared, hair pulled into a messy bun, stethoscope swinging around her neck, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. She froze for half a heartbeat at the sight before her, the drenched man clutching a massive German shepherd, like a lifeline. "Put her down here," she ordered, voice steady and low. She pulled on gloves, already assessing the scene with a practiced eye. Eli laid Rexy gently on the metal table, his arms shaking as if the act of letting go was its own kind of surrender. "She's been in labor all night," he said, voice breaking. "She started crying yesterday evening. I thought she'd manage, but she stopped moving. She's barely breathing." Laura pressed a hand against the dog's side, feeling the faintest pulse beneath her fingers. "How long between contractions?" "Hours," Eli answered. "Too long. Please, she's my family." Laura's expression softened for half a second before the focus returned to her eyes. "We'll do everything we can," she said. "Get me oxygen support. Now!" The nurse moved fast, snapping into trained rhythm, rolling the machine closer, connecting tubes, laying out IV lines. The quiet clinic transformed into a flurry of motion. Metal clinked, machines beeped to life, and the low hum of the oxygen tank joined the rising sound of thunder outside. Rexy's breathing came in shallow, rattled bursts. Her paws twitched, her tongue dry against her teeth. Laura leaned close, her voice barely a whisper. "Hang in there, girl. You're safe now." Eli hovered beside the table, dripping rain onto the floor, unable to look away. His rough, calloused hands fidgeted uselessly. "She's a retired K9, he murmured, as if that might help. "She saved my life once. Took a bullet meant for me. Please don't let her go like this." Laura didn't look up. Her eyes flicked between monitors and Rexy's belly, her fingers tracing gentle circles to check fetal position. "We'll need to see what's going on inside," she said sharply. "Ultrasound, now." The nurse wheeled over the small machine, its screen flickering pale blue in the dim light. The gel spread cold and glistening across Rexy's swollen stomach. Laura moved the probe carefully, eyes scanning the static image that bloomed to life. Black and white shadows swirled, small shapes curled within the dark. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I count 5, maybe 6. Eli leaned closer, searching the screen for hope he didn't understand. Are they alive?" Laura hesitated. On the monitor, 2 faint flickers moved, small, rhythmic pulses. But 3 others were still, too still. Her throat tightened. "Some are," she said softly, "but time's running against us." Eli's breath caught. He reached out, resting a trembling hand near Rexy's paw. "Do whatever you have to. Please." Thunder cracked so loud it shook the windows. The lights flickered once, twice. Laura didn't flinch. She barked quick orders. "Prepare fluids, keep her temperature up, and get the emergency kit ready. We may have to go in." The nurse nodded, moving like clockwork. Eli stepped back, gripping the edge of the counter, his hands white with tension. He watched Laura's face, the calm focus, the unwavering control, and realized she'd done this before, probably too many times. Yet behind her professionalism, something burned quietly, like determination born of grief. Rexy whimpered faintly. Laura adjusted the oxygen mask, whispering, "You're doing good, sweetheart. Stay with me." The monitor's beep slowed, steady, but weaker. Each sound carried the weight of a heartbeat, fighting to stay in rhythm with the storm. Eli looked at her through the blur of tears. "She's been my only family since my wife passed. It's just been me and her on that farm. She's not just a dog." Laura's hand paused for a brief second on the machine, her voice softer now. "Then we're not losing her tonight." Outside, wind clawed at the walls, rattling the gutters. The clinic lights dimmed again, the generator humming in warning. The world felt small, just the rain, the thunder, and the desperate rhythm of the monitor. Laura straightened, pulling the stethoscope from her neck. Her pulse is fading. If the contractions don't progress soon, she won't survive this on her own. She looked at the nurse. Keep her stable. I need to prep for an emergency C-section. The nurse nodded quickly, rushing toward the back room. Eli stood frozen, his throat tight. What can I do? Laura turned to him. For the first time, he saw the weariness behind her eyes. Not from the storm, but from years of carrying the fragile balance between life and death. You can pray, she said simply. He swallowed hard and nodded, stepping back as she worked. The hum of machines filled the silence. The faint flicker of the ultrasound still glowed on the screen. 2 tiny pulses, 3 shadows of stillness. Eli's heart clenched at the sight. Dr. Bennett's hands moved with quiet precision, adjusting Rexy's IV line, whispering under her breath like a vow. Come on, girl. Don't give up on me. Lightning flashed through the window, spilling across the metal table like a silent camera shutter, freezing the scene in harsh white light. The drenched man, the dying dog, the calm doctor fighting against time. Rexy's breathing hitched once, her paw twitching. The monitor stuttered, its steady beep slipping into uneven rhythm. Laura's eyes darted to the screen, lips pressing tight. Heart rate dropping, the nurse called out as she returned, voice tense. Eli's hands went to his mouth. Oh God, please. Laura didn't answer. Her voice dropped to a whisper that barely carried over the rain. Stay with me, girl. Just stay with me. The thunder rolled again, long and low, blending with the monitor's fading tone. One beep, then another, each one slower, softer. Laura leaned close, her breath trembling. We're running out of time. The power flickered once, then again. The old clinic generator groaned under the weight of the storm outside, its low hum mixing with the pounding of rain against the tin roof. Every flash of lightning threw quicksilver light across the sterile room, catching the sheen of metal instruments and the trembling reflection of Dr. Laura Bennett's eyes. She had no time to think about the storm, or the fear clawing at her ribs. There was only the table before her, the dying German shepherd, and the faint rhythm of a heartbeat monitor that sounded like a clock counting down to the end. Prep for surgery, she ordered, voice firm but breathless. We're not waiting any longer. The nurse, Mara, nodded and moved fast, snapping on gloves, checking the oxygen line. The air was heavy with antiseptic and tension. Outside the operating room window, Eli Turner pressed his palms against the glass, his soaked flannel shirt clinging to him. His lips moved silently in prayer. Laura caught the look in his eyes. Raw, pleading, the kind that stripped a person down to their soul. She turned away, swallowing hard. Don't let him see you doubt. She adjusted her mask, exhaled, and spoke softly under her breath. I've seen hundreds of births, but never one this fragile. The hum of the heart monitor filled the silence, a lonely metronome of hope. Thunder rumbled again, long and low, like the growl of something ancient waiting outside. Vitals are weak but holding, Mara said quietly, eyes on the screen. Laura nodded. Scalpel. The metal gleamed in the harsh white light. Her hands, steady but cold, hovered over the trembling rise of Rexy's abdomen. Easy, girl, she whispered. We're right here. The incision was clean, precise, guided by years of experience and a desperate will that came from somewhere deeper than training. Blood welled briefly before the suction pulled it away. The room smelled of iron and rain. Retractor, she said. We need visibility. Mara moved like an extension of Laura's own will, handing tools before words were finished. They'd worked together long enough to communicate through instinct. But tonight, even instinct trembled. Laura's eyes narrowed behind her mask as she opened the uterine wall. "I've got one," she murmured, reaching gently inside. "Come on, baby. Don't give up on me." The first puppy came free, a tiny gray bundle, slick and still. No breath, no movement. Mara's voice cracked. No heartbeat. Laura's pulse thundered in her ears. "No, we're not done." She placed the puppy on a sterile towel, rubbing it briskly with her gloved hands, trying to ignite warmth where there was none. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, sweetheart. Breathe." Nothing. She tilted the tiny muzzle upward and breathed a soft puff of air into its nose. Then 2 fingers, gentle, rhythmic compressions against a chest the size of a walnut. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. 1, 2, 3. Still nothing. Laura pressed harder, her voice trembling now. "Don't you dare quit. Not yet." Behind the glass, Eli's hands balled into fists. He couldn't hear her words, but he could see the urgency in her movements. He sank to his knees, pressing his forehead against the cold glass. "Please, God," he whispered, "please don't take her babies too." Lightning flared. The monitor's steady beep filled the room, louder now, almost cruel in its rhythm. Mara wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her arm, whispering, "Doctor." Laura didn't stop. Her hands moved faster, her breath shallow and ragged. Then, just as she was about to try again, there it was. A faint twitch. Mara gasped. "Wait! Look!" The puppy's tiny paw moved, the smallest flutter of defiance. Then a sound so soft it might have been imagined. A high-pitched squeak, thin and trembling, but real. "It's breathing," Mara said, her voice breaking. Laura froze, exhaling a shuddering breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Good girl," she whispered. "Good girl." She wrapped the pup in a warm towel and placed it near the heat lamp. "One down," she murmured. "Let's keep going." Outside, Eli sobbed, quiet, broken relief shaking his shoulders. He pressed both hands over his face, his lips moving in silent gratitude. For a moment, the storm outside didn't matter. For a moment, the world had narrowed to the sound of one tiny, defiant breath. Laura turned back to the table, her arms trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. "We've got more to save," she said, her tone sharp again. "Suction. Clamp." Mara moved quickly, repositioning instruments. The next contractions were faint, barely visible beneath the incision line. Laura reached inside again, her gloved fingers brushing against another small form. "Second one," she said softly. "Feels weak." This one was smaller, fragile as a bird's heartbeat. It didn't move at all. The weight of it felt wrong. Too light. Laura's throat tightened. She placed it gently on the towel beside the first. "No response," Mara whispered. Laura nodded grimly. "Then we make one." She started compressions again, steady, rhythmic, desperate. Her mind screamed faster, faster, but her hands refused to rush. The clinic's lights flickered once more. The generator coughed, threatening to die. Mara's breath hitched. "Keep it together," Laura said sharply. "We can't lose focus now." Through the glass, Eli pressed his hand flat against the window. His lips formed the words she couldn't hear. "You can do it." Seconds stretched into eternities. Rain battered the roof in relentless waves. The only sounds inside were the click of metal, the suction's hiss, and the haunting pulse of the heart monitor. Then, like a miracle refusing to be denied, the second puppy shuddered. A soft, trembling whimper escaped its lips. Laura exhaled shakily, tears stinging her eyes. "That's it. That's it, baby. She smiled under her mask, voice cracking. Welcome to the world. Mara wiped at her own eyes, murmuring, "Two breathing." The air felt lighter for a moment, though exhaustion pressed heavy against Laura's shoulders. "Two's not enough," she said softly. "We've still got lives waiting." Behind the glass, Eli had fallen completely to his knees now, head bowed. The storm outside reached its peak, thunder rolling so loud it rattled the light fixtures. Each boom felt like the echo of his racing heart. Laura turned her focus back to Rexy. The dog's breathing was shallow, chest rising and falling unevenly. "She's losing strength," Mara said, voice tight. Laura gritted her teeth. "Not yet. She's a fighter." She pressed her palm gently to Rexy's head. "You're doing so good, girl. Just hold on for me, okay? We're almost there." The monitor's rhythm steadied, weak but present, stubbornly in sync with the rain outside. For a fleeting instant, the world seemed to pause. Laura stepped back, glancing at the two tiny lives under the lamp, both barely moving but alive. Her heart pounded, her body trembling with the enormity of what still lay ahead. Eli lifted his head, watching her through the glass, tears streaming down his face. And though she couldn't hear his voice, she saw the words he mouthed again and again, the same silent prayer he'd carried since the storm began. "Please, God, let them live." Laura took a deep breath, pulling her focus back to the table. The rain outside began to slow, but inside the clinic, the battle for life had only just begun. The storm outside had become a living thing. Thunder rolled so deep it shook the floor beneath their feet. The fluorescent lights flickered with every burst of lightning, flashing over Dr. Laura Bennett's pale face as she leaned over the table. Sweat gathered beneath her gloves, the sound of rain hammering the tin roof blending with the quick, stuttering beep of the monitor. "Her vitals are dropping," the nurse whispered. "We're losing time." Laura didn't look up. "Then we move faster." Two small puppies lay beneath the heat lamp, barely breathing, but alive. Their faint cries sounded like the ticking of a fragile clock counting down to dawn. Beside them, Rexy's chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm, her body trembling under the anesthesia. The incision glistened under the light, red against silver. "Scalpel," Laura said quietly. "Let's bring the rest home." The nurse's hands shook as she passed the instrument. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room, painting every surface in cold white. Outside, wind screamed through the trees like the world itself was holding its breath. Laura worked methodically, even as her heart thudded like thunder. The third puppy came free, smaller than the others, limp, its body chilling fast. For a moment she just stared, her breath catching. "No movement," Mara said softly. Laura's jaw tightened. "We don't give up." She placed the pup on a towel, rubbing furiously, her hands a blur. "Come on, baby," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Come on, fight for me." Nothing. She tilted its tiny muzzle upward and blew a small puff of air into its nose. Once, twice, 3 times. Still nothing. "Don't you dare give up on me," she hissed through clenched teeth, her voice breaking. "You hear me? Not tonight." Her hands pressed rhythmically on the pup's chest. Tiny compressions, gentle yet desperate. Each push timed with her heartbeat. Sweat rolled down her temple, stinging her eyes, but she didn't stop. Then, a twitch. A tiny sound, barely audible beneath the storm. The nurse gasped. "Laura! It moved!" Laura froze for a second, then exhaled a shaky laugh that turned to a sob. "There you go," she whispered, smiling behind her mask. "There's my fighter." She wrapped the small pup in a warm towel and handed it to the nurse. "Under the lamp. Don't let the temperature drop." As the nurse hurried to the side, Laura turned back to Rexy. Her hands trembled as she reached in again. 3 breathing, she murmured under her breath. 2 more to go. Another contraction rippled weakly through the dog's abdomen. Her pulse fluttered on the monitor like a candle flickering in wind. Laura could feel her slipping. "Stay with me, girl," she said softly. "I need you to hang on." The 4th puppy emerged moments later, silent, too still. The nurse didn't even have to say it this time. Laura could see it in her eyes. "Get me adrenaline," Laura said firmly, "and a warming pad." She cradled the motionless pup in her palm, barely larger than her hand, and began the same routine. Rub, breathe, press. Her arms were shaking now, her breath ragged. Lightning flashed again, lighting her face with the same desperate brilliance as before. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured. "You're not leaving me now. Not when your brothers and sisters made it." The nurse's eyes filled with tears as she worked beside her. Sweat ran down her temple, mixing with the moisture in her gloves. "Doctor, she's losing blood pressure fast," she whispered. "Her pulse is weakening." Laura didn't answer. She bent lower, pressing again and again until her arms burned. For a few long seconds there was nothing but silence, the kind of silence that crushes hope flat. Then a miracle. The faintest squeak, so soft it could have been the wind. But it wasn't. "It's breathing," Mara whispered, disbelief breaking into joy. Laura's shoulders sagged, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Good girl," she whispered to the tiny creature in her hand. "Welcome home." She placed the 4th puppy beside the others under the lamp, her hands trembling with exhaustion. Her voice cracked. 4 breathing, she said, almost to herself. Mara gave a trembling laugh. "I can't believe it. 4 out of 5. "Not yet," Laura interrupted. "There's still 1 more." The nurse swallowed hard. "Doctor, her heart rate. Look." The monitor stuttered. The rhythmic beeping that had carried them through the storm faltered, becoming uneven. Laura's head snapped toward it. The green line wavered, dipped, then steadied again, weaker than before. "Eli," Mara whispered, glancing toward the window. Outside the glass, Eli Turner had his hands pressed against the pane, eyes wide with panic. He could see the change on the screen. His mouth moved, but his voice didn't reach them through the glass. The words were clear enough anyway. "Save her. Please." Laura's chest tightened. "I'm trying," she whispered under her breath. "God, I'm trying." She reached inside again, her fingers finding the final puppy, the smallest, barely moving. She pulled it free, her breath catching at how light it was. "It's weak," she said, voice low, trembling. "Get the oxygen line ready." But before she could begin, the monitor wailed, one long, flat tone. Rexy's heartbeat was gone. "Flatline!" the nurse cried. "We're losing her!" Laura's world collapsed into motion. "Adrenaline, now!" she shouted. Mara handed her the syringe with shaking hands. Laura injected it directly into Rexy's vein, then pressed her palms to the dog's chest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each push desperate, rhythm steady but frantic. "Come on," she gasped. "Come on, girl, don't you do this to me!" Outside, Eli slammed his fist against the glass, his voice breaking through the storm. "Save her! Please save her!" Laura's own voice cracked. "Stay with me, Rexy! Stay with me!" Her hands kept moving, pressing life back into the still body. Mara's lips moved silently in prayer. The seconds stretched into eternity. The only sounds were the storm and Laura's ragged breathing. Then, a blip. The monitor flickered. One beep. Then another. Then steady, fragile rhythm. The sound was the most beautiful thing Laura had ever heard. She froze, eyes filling with tears, a single laugh breaking through her exhaustion. "There you are," she whispered. "That's my brave girl." Mara's voice trembled. "Pulse stabilizing." Laura sagged back in relief, her gloves stained, her hair damp with sweat. She looked at the 5 tiny puppies wriggling weakly under the warm glow of the lamp. Their small bodies shifted and cried, a fragile chorus of life. the sound rising over the storm like a hymn. Outside, Eli sank to his knees in the hallway, both hands pressed to the glass. Tears streamed down his face. "Thank you," he whispered, voice breaking. "Thank you." Inside, Laura reached out and placed her hand gently on Rexy's head. The dog's chest rose faintly, tail twitching once, as if to answer. "Welcome back, brave girl," Laura whispered. The thunder rolled one last time, softer now, fading into rain. And in the quiet between, heartbeats, 5 tiny lives began in their first song. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a silence that felt almost fragile. The world outside was drenched in silver, the kind of stillness that follows chaos, where even the air seems afraid to move. Inside the small clinic, the lights had dimmed to a soft amber glow, powered by the weary hum of the backup generator. The surgery room looked different now. The urgency was gone, replaced by a haunting calm. The stainless steel table had been cleaned, the instruments neatly arranged again, and the only sound was the steady beeping of the heart monitor beside Rexy's bed, a reminder that for now, life had chosen to stay. Dr. Laura Bennett sat slumped on a stool beside her patient, elbows resting on her knees, gloves discarded, her scrubs streaked with blood and sweat. Her hair clung damply to her temples. She hadn't moved in hours. Across the room, the nurse, Mara, glanced over from her desk, worry creasing her tired face. "You should rest, Laura," she said gently. "You've been at it all night." Laura shook her head without looking up. "Not yet. You'll collapse if you don't. Her vitals are stable. You did it." Laura's voice came quiet, hoarse. "I've heard that before." The words hung in the air, heavy as rain-soaked clouds. Mara hesitated, unsure how to respond. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. Finally, she sighed and whispered, "All right, I'll make some coffee," before leaving the room quietly. When the door shut, Laura leaned forward and rested her elbows on the edge of the table where Rexy lay. The German shepherd's chest rose and fell in slow, shallow rhythm, her paw twitching faintly against the blanket. The soft light traced the gentle lines of her muzzle, the faint tremble in her whiskers, the flicker of breath that carried the scent of anesthesia and life. "You fought hard," Laura murmured, brushing a stray tuft of fur from Rexy's ear. "Harder than most humans I know." Her voice softened, barely above a whisper. "You remind me of her, you know. The same stubborn eyes, the same fight." For a long moment, she just sat there, listening to the faint hum of the machines. Then her voice trembled slightly as she continued. "Her name was Luna," she said, her tone distant, half memory, half confession. "Another shepherd, big, proud, always guarding her owner like her life depended on it. She came in one winter night, complications during labor, just like you." Her hand froze for a moment on Rexy's paw. "I was younger then, thought I could save anyone if I worked hard enough." Her throat tightened. "But I couldn't save her. She bled out right there on the table. Her owner, God, I can still see his face. He kept saying, 'She trusts you,' over and over, like it was a prayer." Her eyes glistened under the low light. "I promised myself after that I'd never lose another like her, but promises don't mean much to fate, do they?" She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat refusing to go down. "I told myself it was just part of the job, that you can't save them all. But every time I walk into this room, I still hear her heartbeat fade. And every time I hold a dog like you, I swear I can feel her ghost watching me." A faint whimper escaped Rexy's throat, almost as if she understood. Her paw twitched again, pressing weakly against Laura's wrist. The small gesture broke something open in the vet's chest. Laura let out a trembling laugh. "You're a good listener, you know that? Maybe better than most people." She reached out and brushed her fingers gently along the side of Rexy's face. "I couldn't save Luna," she whispered, tears finally slipping free, catching the glow of the lamp. "But I can save you. I have to." The clock on the wall ticked softly, the seconds stretching thin. Outside, the storm had left the world dripping and still, the scent of wet grass seeping faintly through the cracked window. Every few minutes, the distant rumble of thunder rolled across the horizon, gentle now, like a heartbeat echoing in retreat. Across the room, a shadow stirred. Eli Turner was slumped in a chair by the wall, one arm hanging loosely at his side, the other clutching his hat against his chest. He had fallen asleep sitting upright, exhaustion finally overtaking him. His boots were still caked with mud, and his face looked years older under the flickering light. At the sound of Laura's voice, he stirred slightly, half awake. He didn't move or speak, just listened. Through the glass wall, he watched her, this woman who had fought for his dog with the ferocity of someone defending family. Her shoulders trembled with silent tears, her hand never leaving Rexy's paw. And as he listened to her voice, a blend of strength and grief, something inside him shifted. He had thought this night was about his loss, his fear. But now he realized the woman before him wasn't just saving his dog. She was saving a piece of herself. Laura leaned closer, her forehead nearly touching Rexy's paw. "You made it through the storm, girl," she whispered, her voice cracking with fatigue. "Just keep breathing. That's all I ask. Just breathe." Rexy's ear flicked once, her tail giving the faintest twitch. Laura smiled through the tears. "That's it. Good girl." For the first time all night, her body began to relax. The adrenaline that had carried her for hours slowly ebbed away, leaving behind a deep, bone-heavy exhaustion. She could feel every ache, every heartbeat in her fingertips. The door creaked open quietly, Mara returning with 2 mugs of coffee. But when she saw Laura hunched over the table, eyes closed, hand still resting on the dog's paw, she stopped in the doorway. The scene before her was something sacred. 2 souls, human and animal, bound by exhaustion, loss, and love. Mara set the mugs down silently and turned off the overhead light, leaving only the warm glow of the lamp. The room dimmed into stillness. Outside, the sky was clearing. The rain had softened to a drizzle, glinting in the faint light of dawn creeping over the fields. Laura's breathing slowed. Her hand stayed where it was, fingers curled gently around Rexy's paw as sleep finally claimed her. On the other side of the glass, Eli watched quietly, his throat tight, eyes wet. In that fragile, wordless moment, he understood something he never had before. That sometimes the people who save lives are the ones most haunted by the ones they couldn't. The clinic was silent again, except for the steady rhythm of 2 heartbeats, one human, one canine, echoing together in the gentle hush before morning. Dawn crept slowly over the Louisiana horizon, painting the wet earth in shades of gold and rose. The storm had finally surrendered, leaving behind a silence so pure it almost felt like reverence. Inside the small clinic, the chaos of the night was gone, replaced by the soft hum of machines and the faint, rhythmic beeping of life. Warm sunlight spilled through the blinds, landing across the recovery table where Rexy lay. Her fur glowed under the light, no longer slick with sweat and blood but brushed and clean, her breathing shallow yet steady. Beside her, 5 tiny puppies nursed in slow, fragile rhythm, small bodies pressed close, their tiny tails twitching with the instinct of survival. Dr. Laura Bennett sat nearby, motionless, hands wrapped around a cold mug of coffee she hadn't touched. Her eyelids drooped, exhaustion tugging at her bones, but she refused to look away. Every sound, every breath, was a reminder of what they'd fought for. Mara, the nurse, yawned softly from across the room, her voice hushed. "They're strong," she said, glancing at the pups. Stronger than I thought they'd be. Laura smiled faintly, her voice hoarse. She gave them that. Every bit of her strength. Through the window, the first light touched the bayou. The storm had washed everything clean. The road, the fields, the sky. It felt like the world had started over. For a few moments, peace reigned. Laura leaned back in her chair, her body heavy, but her heart light for the first time in hours. The puppies suckled quietly, their faint squeaks blending with the soft ticking of the clock. Rexy stirred slightly, her ear flicking. The monitor beeped steadily, calm, reassuring, alive. Laura exhaled, whispering to herself, "We did it." Then, silence. It happened so suddenly, she thought she'd imagined it. The beeping stopped mid-note. The monitor's green line froze, then went flat. A long, unbroken tone filled the room, one she'd hoped never to hear again. Laura's head snapped toward the machine. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no!" She was on her feet before the chair even hit the floor, her heart pounding. "Mara!" she shouted, her voice breaking. "Get the kit!" The nurse was already moving, fumbling for the crash cart. "It can't be! She was stable!" Laura pressed 2 fingers against Rexy's throat. Nothing. The pulse was gone. Her mind screamed against it, but her training took over. She ripped the oxygen mask off, her voice trembling. "Not now, girl. Not after everything." The puppies squirmed beside their mother, their tiny whimpers cutting through the noise like glass. The flatline continued, that merciless, endless tone. Laura's hands were shaking as she reached for the syringe. "Adrenaline. 1 milliliter," she said breathlessly. Mara handed it over. "Here." Laura injected it directly into the vein, her movements sharp, desperate. "Come on, Rexy. Come back to me." Then she pressed her hands to the dog's chest, rhythmically compressing. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. The room filled with the sound of effort. Gloves against fur, ragged breathing, the faint mewling of newborns. The monitor stayed silent. "Don't you do this," Laura whispered through clenched teeth. "You fought too hard. You don't quit on me now." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. Her arms burned, her chest heaved, but still she pressed on. Mara's tears spilled freely as she wiped Rexy's muzzle, whispering, "Come on, sweetheart. Come back." Lightning no longer flashed outside, but the light inside the clinic felt just as electric, charged with fear and memory. Every sound magnified. The squeak of the puppies, the hiss of oxygen, the whisper of hope refusing to die. Laura's mind flickered. Not to Rexy, but to Luna. That winter night years ago. The blood, the silence, the way the heartbeat had stopped and never returned. Not again. Not this one, too. Her voice became a plea. "You hear them, Rexy? They need you. You're their mother. They need your heartbeat." Her hands pressed harder. The monitor remained flat. Seconds stretched like an eternity. Sweat ran down her temples, her vision blurring. Her arms trembled from exhaustion, but she refused to stop. "Come on," she gasped. "One more breath. One more." Then, a flicker. The monitor blipped once, then again. A faint, uneven beat. Weak, but there. Mara froze, eyes wide. "Laura, look!" Laura's head jerked toward the screen. "Oh my God," she breathed. The line began to rise and fall again, irregular but alive. The tone changed, from the dreadful flat line to a shaky, uncertain beep, then another, then steady. "She's back," Mara whispered in disbelief. "She's back!" Laura let out a shuddering laugh that melted into sobs. Her knees nearly gave out as she leaned forward, resting her forehead against Rexy's chest. The faint vibration of breath against her skin was the most beautiful feeling in the world. Tears fell freely now, hot against her cheeks. "You scared me, you impossible girl," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. "You scared us all." The puppies had stilled, sensing the shift. One gave a tiny squeal, nudging closer to their mother's warmth. Rexy's tail twitched weakly, her chest rising again, slow but sure. Behind them, the door creaked. Eli stood in the doorway, still in the same mud-stained clothes from the night before. His face was pale, eyes wide. He had seen the commotion, heard the alarm. His hands gripped the doorframe, trembling. "What happened?" he whispered. Laura turned to him, tears still streaming down her face. Her voice was soft but filled with awe. "She came back," she said, her throat tight. "She came back because she heard them." Eli blinked, unable to speak. His gaze shifted to Rexy, lying motionless except for the faint movement of her chest, surrounded by her newborns. The sight broke him completely. He stepped forward slowly, one hand covering his mouth. Laura straightened, wiping her eyes with the back of her arm. "You can come closer," she said, voice barely a whisper. "She's okay now." Eli knelt beside the table, his calloused hand resting gently on Rexy's head. Her ear flicked at his touch. He swallowed hard, his voice shaking. "You came back, girl," he whispered. "You heard them, and you came back." The golden morning light filled the room, chasing away the last of the night's darkness. The heart monitor continued its soft, steady rhythm, the sound of life reclaimed. Laura stood quietly beside them, one hand resting over her heart, the other gripping the edge of the table for strength. The emotion in her eyes said everything. Exhaustion, relief, and something deeper. Reverence for the fragile, unexplainable mercy of life. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Only the sound of 5 tiny heartbeats filled the room, mingling with their mother's own, a symphony of survival echoing through the golden quiet of dawn. A week passed, and the world seemed to breathe again. The storms that had ravaged the bayou were gone now, leaving behind skies of soft blue and roads that smelled of rain and wildflowers. Morning sunlight stretched lazily across the small town of Willow Bend, glinting off puddles that shimmered like glass. And in that tiny roadside clinic at the edge of town, the one where life and death had wrestled only days ago, laughter had found its way back in. Dr. Laura Bennett stood by the open window, the scent of fresh hay and antiseptic drifting through the air. Outside, the clinic's garden was in bloom, yellow lilies pushing through the wet soil. Birds perched on the fence posts, chirping as if the world itself had been waiting for a reason to sing again. Rexy lay in her pen near the window, her fur glistening in the sunlight, chest rising in calm, steady rhythm. She was a different sight now, alert, strong, her golden brown eyes alive with warmth. The long scar across her abdomen had begun to heal, hidden beneath soft, brushed fur. Her tail thumped lazily whenever someone walked by, and beside her, the miracle she'd fought for. 5 tiny puppies, each one plump and wobbly-legged, tumbling over one another in a clumsy pile of fur and squeaks. Their soft cries filled the clinic like the laughter of children. One barked, a sound so small and proud that even Laura laughed out loud. "You've got quite a voice, little one," she said, kneeling beside them. "Just like your mama." Rexy turned her head toward the sound, her ears perking up. Laura reached over, gently scratching behind her ear. "You've done beautifully, girl," she whispered. "You gave this whole town something to believe in again." As if on cue, the clinic door creaked open and the small brass bell chimed. Eli Turner stepped in, sunlight haloing around him. His clothes were clean for once, though his boots still carried the mud of long workdays. In his hands were two paper bags, one smelling of fried chicken, the other of dog biscuits. "Well, well," Laura said, smiling. "I was wondering when you'd stop pretending to just check in and admit you've been spoiling her." Eli chuckled, setting the bags on the counter. "What can I say? Old habits die hard. She's always had me wrapped around her paw." He crouched beside the pen, his voice softening. "Hey there, partner. Look at you, all fancy again." Rexy lifted her head and wagged her tail furiously, pressing her nose against his hand. Eli's voice broke into a laugh. "That's right. I brought your favorite, chicken liver biscuits. Don't tell the doc." Laura raised a brow. "I heard that." Eli grinned sheepishly. "You didn't hear how many." The lightness in the room felt contagious. Even the nurse, Mara, peeked from the hallway, smiling as she watched the man and the dog reunite. The town had started sending small tokens every day: flowers, thank you cards, fresh-baked pies. Word of the miracle at Bennett's clinic had spread faster than gossip ever had. A retired teacher had sent a hand-painted sign that now hung proudly above the counter: "Where hope has a pulse." Eli sat cross-legged by the pen, watching the puppies tumble. One climbed onto Rexy's paw and promptly rolled off again. Another tugged at its sibling's ear, tiny teeth gnawing with clumsy determination. "Would you look at that?" Eli said softly, shaking his head. "I've seen rookies in the academy with less fight than these little ones." Laura laughed, leaning against the counter. "Maybe they take after their mother. Or maybe their trainer," he said, nodding at her. "You didn't quit on her." She smiled, eyes lowering. "Neither did you." For a moment, silence settled between them. Not the heavy kind, but peaceful, shared. Outside, a truck rumbled past, and from the town square came the faint sounds of laughter, the market reopening, children running in, puddles. Eli broke the silence with a low chuckle. "You know, back when she was still on the force, Rexy had this habit. Whenever the sirens went off, she'd howl. Not because she was scared, because she wanted to go. It was like the sound lit a fire under her." Laura smiled. "Sounds like someone I know." He grinned. "Yeah, she dragged me through more messes than I care to count. There was this one time, raid out near Baton Rouge. She cornered a suspect twice her size. Wouldn't back down. I swear, that dog has more guts than half the department." Rexy lifted her head as if she understood, tail thumping against the blanket. Eli chuckled, reaching in to scratch under her chin. "You remember that, huh? You crazy girl." The room filled with warmth, laughter, the smell of coffee, the soft rustling of tiny paws. The puppies stumbled toward Eli's voice, climbing over each other, squeaking in protest when one toppled over. Laura knelt beside them, scooping up the smallest one. Its fur was lighter than the others, its eyes still half closed. "This one's a dreamer," she said softly. "Always the last to wake, the last to stop eating." Eli smiled. "Then name her something fitting." Laura thought for a moment, watching the puppy yawn. "Hope," she said finally. "Seems right." Eli nodded, his expression softening. "Hope," he echoed. "Yeah, that fits." For the first time in days, Laura laughed freely, not from relief or exhaustion, but from something pure. The kind of laughter that felt like healing. As the morning drifted on, locals stopped by the clinic door, knocking politely before stepping in. Mrs. Duval from the bakery brought a basket of warm bread. A young boy handed Laura a drawing of Rexy and her puppies, scrawled in crayon. "My mom said heroes come in all sizes," he said shyly, before darting back out. Eli looked around the room, his eyes glistening. "You realize what you did here?" he said. "You didn't just save a dog. You gave this town something good to talk about again." Laura shook her head gently. I didn't do it alone. Rexy stretched, letting out a low, content sigh. Her puppies, full from nursing, piled together in a heap beside her belly, twitching in tiny dreams. The sunlight touched their fur, turning them into 5 golden sparks against the soft blanket. Laura watched them for a long moment, a peaceful smile on her lips. They're going to make it, she whispered. Eli nodded. Yeah, he said softly. They already have. Outside, the church bells began to ring, signaling noon. A light breeze carried the scent of blooming magnolia through the window. Inside, laughter mingled with birdsong, and the clinic, once filled with cries and fear, now pulsed with life again. Mara entered with 2 mugs of coffee, her smile tired but bright. If I didn't see it myself, she said, I'd swear this place was touched by grace. Laura smiled, glancing at Rexy. Maybe it was. Eli lifted his cup. To healing, he said. Laura raised hers in reply. To hope. And in that sunlit room surrounded by flowers, laughter, and 5 tiny heartbeats, both of them finally felt what the storm had tried to take. Peace. The morning sun rose soft and golden over Willow Bend, spilling warmth through the windows of the small animal clinic. The world outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows healing. The grass still shimmered with dew, and the faint scent of magnolia drifted through the open doorway. Inside, the clinic stirred awake slowly. Mara, the nurse, was the first to arrive. Her shoes squeaked gently on the tile as she moved through the hallway, humming a tune under her breath. She pushed open the recovery room door, expecting to be greeted by the same sight as every morning. Rexy resting peacefully, her 5 puppies nestled close. But something else waited for her that day. At first, she didn't notice it. The small cardboard box left just outside the clinic door. It was plain, damp from the morning mist, and sealed only by hope. She might have walked past it, had it not been for the faint sound that came from inside. A soft, broken whimper. Mara froze, her heart skipping. She knelt down, fingers trembling as she peeled back the flaps. Inside, wrapped in a thin towel, was a tiny puppy, no more than a week old, shivering violently. Its ribs showed beneath the patchy fur, its breath shallow and uneven. "Oh, sweetheart," Mara whispered, scooping it gently into her hands. "Where did you come from?" The little body was cold, too cold. It whimpered again, a sound so fragile it could have been mistaken for a sigh. Without another thought, she hurried inside, cradling the pup close to her chest. "Dr. Bennett," she called. "You need to see this." Laura appeared moments later, still pulling on her white coat, her hair tied hastily. "What is it?" Mara held up the bundle. "Someone left it outside. I think it's been out there all night." Laura's eyes softened as she stepped closer. She could see the tremor in the tiny body, the faint frost on the towel. "Poor thing," she murmured, her voice low and heavy. "It's starving." She took the puppy carefully, her practiced hands moving with both precision and care. The pup's head rolled weakly against her palm. Its breathing was barely there. Laura's brow furrowed. "Mara, get a warming pad and glucose solution, quick," she said. "We'll try, but—" She paused, glancing toward Rexy's pen. "The newborns are still fragile. I can't risk infection." Mara hesitated. "So what do we do?" Laura stared at the puppy for a long moment, the weight of the decision settling in her chest. She'd seen this before. The abandoned ones. The ones left behind when they were no longer convenient. It never got easier. "It won't survive without a mother," she said, quietly, more to herself than anyone. "Not in this state." Her voice cracked on the last word. The room fell silent except for the faint whimpers of the 5 pups nearby. Rexy stirred at the sound, her ears twitching. Her eyes, those deep, knowing amber eyes, opened slowly. Laura sighed, sitting beside her. "You've done enough, girl," she said softly, brushing a hand over her fur. "You don't need to take on any more." But Rexy didn't look at Laura. Her gaze was fixed on the towel in the doctor's arms. Then, to Laura's surprise, she stood. Her legs trembled slightly from the movement, but there was determination in every step. She took one slow pace forward, then another, and another. "Easy," Laura murmured, watching her. "You're still recovering." Rexy ignored her. She stopped in front of Laura and stretched her neck toward the small bundle. Her nose twitched, sniffing gently. The puppy whimpered again, a frail, pitiful sound, and Rexy's ears lifted. Then, without hesitation, she began to lick the puppy's face. Slow, deliberate strokes, the kind of touch that could only come from instinct, from love. The room went still. Mara froze, hand over her mouth. Laura didn't move. She's adopting it," Mara whispered, her voice trembling with awe. Laura blinked, unable to speak for a moment. She felt her throat tighten. "After everything she's been through," she whispered, her eyes glistening, "she still chooses love." Rexy nudged the puppy closer with her nose, guiding Laura's hands until the tiny creature was pressed against her belly. The newborns stirred, sniffing at the new arrival curiously. One of them let out a small squeak of protest, but Rexy gave a soft grunt, a mother's quiet command. Within moments, the orphan had nestled in beside the others, trembling less now, its body seeking warmth. Rexy's paw came to rest over the group protectively, her breathing deep and steady. Mara wiped her eyes, unable to contain the emotion. She just accepted it," she said. "Like it was always hers." Laura swallowed hard, kneeling beside Rexy. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Maybe that's what love really is. Not blood, not birth, just the choice to care anyway." She brushed a hand across Rexy's head, her fingers trembling slightly. "You've taught me more about kindness than most people ever could." The sun climbed higher through the window, spilling light across the pen. The tiny family shimmered in gold. 6 small bodies huddled beneath one mother's warmth. The new puppy, once barely breathing, let out a faint squeak, then began to nurse. Laura exhaled shakily. "She's feeding," she murmured. "She's really feeding." Mara smiled through her tears. "Guess she's one of them now." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of meaning, of quiet reverence, a moment that didn't need words. The air felt sacred. Eli arrived later that morning, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and his toolbox in the other. "Heard we've got another miracle in here," he said, his voice gentle, but his eyes curious. Laura gestured toward the pen. "Come see for yourself." He stepped closer, and when he saw the scene, Rexy curled around all 6 puppies, including the tiny orphan now sleeping peacefully against her side. His breath caught. "I'll be damned," he whispered. "She's got a bigger heart than most people I know." Laura smiled softly. "She's teaching us all a thing or two." Eli crouched down, shaking his head in wonder. "After everything she's been through, she still has room for one more." Laura nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "She reminds me that healing isn't just surviving. It's loving again, even when it hurts." Outside, the sunlight brightened, spilling warmth into the room. Rexy stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open for a moment, before closing again. The puppies shifted in their sleep, their soft, rhythmic breathing filling the air like a lullaby. Laura stood silently, watching them, her heart full. "She chose love," she whispered again, "not to anyone, but to herself. And as the camera of the world seemed to pull back, that small clinic, the one that had seen storms, loss, and miracles, glowed with quiet grace. 6 tiny heartbeats, one weary mother, and a single unspoken truth. Love, no matter how scarred, always finds a way back. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Louisiana bayou, painting the water in ribbons of gold and rose. Cypress trees stood like silent sentinels, their roots curled in still reflection. The world had gone quiet again, that gentle quiet that comes after a storm, when everything finally exhales. At the small clinic on the edge of Willow Bend, the light from the windows glowed warm and amber. Inside, peace had taken residence. The smell of hay and antiseptic mixed with the faint sweetness of wildflowers left by townsfolk days before. The hum of the ceiling fan was steady and soft, stirring the late summer air. Dr. Laura Bennett was finishing her notes at the counter, her hands moving slowly, deliberately. Every sound felt sacred now. The scratch of pen on paper, the soft squeaks of newborn paws against a blanket, the rhythmic breathing of a dog who had defied every odd to still be here. Rexy lay near the window, surrounded by her 6 pups, a small bundle of warmth and life. Her eyes half closed, ears twitching lazily, she looked more at peace than Laura had ever seen her. The puppies, now stronger and rounder, tumbled over one another with uncoordinated joy. The orphan, once the weakest of all, was nestled safely against her mother's chest, feeding quietly. Laura smiled. "You've done it, girl," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "All 6 of them. You kept every promise." The soft ring of the front bell broke the silence. The clinic door creaked open, letting in the scent of the bayou, clean earth, sun-warmed reeds, and the faint perfume of wild honeysuckle. Eli Turner stepped inside. His shadow stretched across the floor, long and golden. He carried a handful of wildflowers tied together with a piece of twine. The petals were mismatched, daisies, clover, a few scrappy buttercups. But in their rough imperfection, they carried a sincerity no florist could match. He stood for a moment in the doorway, his eyes adjusting to the soft light. Then he saw her. Rexy. Alive. Strong. Her puppies wriggling around her like 6 tiny suns orbiting the same light. The sight hit him like a wave. He took one shaky breath, and his hand trembled around the flowers. His voice caught before he could even speak. Laura looked up and smiled softly. "You came," she said. Eli nodded, his throat thick. "Didn't think I'd make it through the week without checking on her." "She's been waiting," Laura said gently. "Come on in." Eli walked slowly across the room, each step deliberate, reverent. When he reached the pen, he dropped to one knee, the flowers still in his hand. "Hey, girl," he whispered. Rexy's ears perked at once. She lifted her head, tail thumping against the blanket, a soft, eager whine rising from her chest. Eli laughed through tears. "There you are, my brave girl." She stretched her neck toward him, pressing her nose to his hand. The warmth of her breath, the familiar weight of her trust. It undid him completely. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered, "You saved my life twice, you know that? Once in the line of duty, and once right here." His voice cracked. He swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. "You didn't give up on me then, and you sure as hell didn't give up now." Laura stood quietly in the corner, letting the moment belong to them. The light fell across Eli's face, a man who had seen too much loss and found healing in fur and devotion. He brushed his hand along Rexy's muzzle, his voice trembling. "You were my partner, my best one, and when I thought I'd lost you, I swear, I didn't know who I was anymore." Rexy licked his fingers, slow and gentle, her eyes gleaming with something that needed no words. Behind her, one of the puppies tumbled clumsily toward Eli's boot, pawing at the laces and yipping with a soft bark. He laughed quietly, scooping it up in his rough hands. "Now what do we have here?" he murmured. "You got your mama's stubborn eyes, don't you?" Laura approached, smiling. "That one's Hope," she said. Eli nodded, chuckling through his tears. "Figures. She's got the spirit for it." He set the puppy gently back beside its siblings, then placed the flowers down next to Rexy's bed. "These are from my field," he said softly. "Didn't have much else to bring, but seemed fitting." Laura crouched beside him. "They're beautiful," she said. "She'll like them." Eli looked up at her, his eyes wet but kind. "You know, Doc," he said quietly, "you didn't just save her. You saved me, too." Laura shook her head gently. "No," she said. "She saved us all." Eli tilted his head, confused. Laura smiled faintly, her gaze fixed on Rexy and her pups. "You think you were the only one who needed her? That night reminded me what this job means. It's not about fixing bodies. It's about protecting the hearts that make life worth living." Eli's breath caught at her words. He turned back to Rexy, stroking her fur. "She's good at that," he said quietly. "Always has been." Rexy sighed contentedly, lowering her head as the last bit of sunlight brushed across her face. The puppies piled together beside her, a tangle of soft warmth. The room glowed in a golden stillness, the kind that feels like gratitude turned into light. For a while no one spoke. There was no need to. The only sounds were the faint coos of the puppies and the gentle creak of the fan turning overhead. Laura rose slowly, her voice low. "She'll be ready to go home soon," she said. "Just a few more days to regain her strength." Eli smiled faintly. "Home," he whispered, the word carrying more weight than it ever had. "Yeah, she deserves that." He stood and took a long, steady breath, letting the peace of the moment settle into him. Then he turned to Laura. "You ever think maybe some souls get sent here twice? Once to serve and once to heal?" Laura looked at Rexy, her heart full. "If that's true," she said softly, "then she's already done both." Eli chuckled quietly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Yeah," he murmured, "guess she has." The sun dipped lower, the room bathed in honey-colored light. Dust motes drifted lazily in the air like tiny blessings. Laura crossed to the door, opening it slightly to let the breeze roll in. The smell of wet grass and honeysuckle filled the clinic, wrapping around them like a benediction. Eli turned for one last look. Rexy had fallen asleep, her head resting across her paws, her puppies pressed close, 6 small testaments to survival, love, and grace. "She's a miracle," he whispered. Laura smiled. "No," she said softly. "She's a reminder." He looked at her, brow furrowed. "Of what?" "That even after the hardest nights," she said, glancing toward the setting sun, "the light always finds its way back in." Outside, the sky burned orange and violet, and the bayou shimmered like molten gold. Inside, 6 small heartbeats pulsed in harmony with the fading day. Eli took one final look at his old partner and whispered, "Rest now, girl. You've earned it." And as he stepped out into the evening glow, the camera would linger on Rexy, her breathing calm, her pups safe, the living proof that love, once given freely, always finds its way home. Evening settled over Willow Bend like a slow exhale. The last light of day melted into shades of amber and blue, the sky stretching wide and endless above the quiet Louisiana bayou. Fireflies began to stir along the tall reeds, their tiny lanterns flickering against the dusky air. The storm-scarred world was calm now, healed, at peace. Inside the small clinic, the lights had dimmed to a soft golden glow. The day's bustle was done. The instruments were cleaned, the charts filed, and the smell of disinfectant had given way to the faint scent of coffee and hay. Dr. Laura Bennett moved slowly through the empty hallway, her steps light but tired. Every muscle in her body ached, but it was the kind of ache that carried meaning, the weight of something finished, something good. She reached the recovery room door and paused. Through the glass, she could see them. Rexy lay curled in her pen, the rise and fall of her chest slow and steady. Around her, 6 tiny bodies slept in a tangle of fur and dreams. Their soft breaths filled the space with a gentle rhythm. The sound of survival turned into song. Laura leaned her head against the frame, closing her eyes for a moment. The hum of the heart monitor, now a steady, healthy pulse, reminded her of the night it had nearly gone silent. She could still feel the pounding in her hands, the sting of tears, the sound of Eli's voice begging through the glass. Every heartbeat, every desperate second, had led to this. A room filled not with fear, but with peace. She smiled faintly. "You did it, girl," she whispered. "You brought everyone back with you." Turning off the light, she stepped outside into the cooling air. The sky had deepened into cobalt, streaked with traces of dying sunlight. The crickets had begun their evening hymn, their steady hum carrying across the quiet fields. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled, distant, soft, harmless now. Laura pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders and leaned against the wooden railing that lined the porch. The night smelled of damp soil and honeysuckle. The clinic's windows glowed behind her like a beacon in the dark. Small, but steady. She tilted her head back, staring at the stars beginning to appear one by one. It felt strange, she thought, how silence could be so full. Her mind wandered back to that night. The fear, the chaos, the helplessness, and then the miracles. One tiny heartbeat after another. The memory was still raw, yet beautiful in its ache. The sound of footsteps behind her broke the stillness. "Evening," a familiar voice said softly. Laura turned. Eli stood at the door, his hat in one hand, 2 steaming cups of coffee in the other. He looked cleaner tonight, rested even, though the traces of fatigue around his eyes hadn't faded. He offered 1 cup with a small, tired smile. "Figured you might still be here." Laura chuckled softly, accepting it. "You figured right." They stood, side by side for a moment, saying nothing, sipping coffee as the night settled around them. The air was cool now, the breeze carrying the scent of pine and fresh rain. Eli glanced through the clinic window, his gaze lingering on the sleeping shepherd and her pups. "You know," he said quietly, "I've seen a lot in my years. Accidents, fires, loss, things that make you wonder if there's any good left in this world." Laura said nothing, just waited. He turned to her, his voice low and steady. "But watching what you did, watching her come back, it changed something in me. You didn't just save a dog." His throat tightened, and he took a breath. "You gave me back my faith." Laura looked down at the cup in her hands, the steam curling upward like a whisper. When she lifted her gaze again, her eyes were soft but filled with quiet conviction. "She did that," she said. "We just listened." Eli frowned slightly. "Listened?" "To life," Laura said simply. "To the part of it that refuses to quit, even when it's breaking. You can't create miracles, Eli. You just have to make room for them." He smiled faintly, staring at the horizon. "Guess you made plenty of room then." Laura laughed quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe she just made me remember why I started this in the first place. For a while, they stood in silence. The sun was gone now, the sky deep and endless, stars flickering across it like tiny promises. The faint reflection of the moon shimmered on the water, soft and steady. Inside, a faint noise echoed, a small bark, high-pitched and curious. Then another. The puppies were awake again, tumbling over one another, their tiny voices blending into the sound of crickets outside. The noises carried through the clinic walls, filling the porch with life. Eli chuckled. Sounds like someone's having a party. Laura smiled. They've earned it. The sound of laughter, soft, unspoken, passed between them. Then Eli spoke again, his voice quiet but sincere. When I first came here that night, I thought I was bringing you a dying dog. I didn't realize I was walking into a miracle. Laura glanced at him, her voice almost a whisper. Neither did I. He set his empty cup on the railing, his eyes distant. You ever think about what comes next for her? Every day, Laura admitted. She'll go home with you soon. But I think... She trailed off, gazing at the glow of the clinic window. I think she's already found her peace here. Eli nodded, his voice soft. And maybe you have too. She looked at him, surprised, then smiled faintly. Maybe. The crickets grew louder, blending with the faint chorus of puppy barks inside. The breeze carried the sound across the fields, mingling with the faraway roll of thunder. Everything, the night, the air, the light, felt in rhythm. Eli pushed himself away from the railing, straightening his hat. Well, he said, softly, I should let you close up. Long day tomorrow. Laura nodded. Good night, Eli. He turned halfway toward her, his silhouette framed by the glow of the porch light. Good night, Doc, and thank you for everything. She smiled, her voice barely a whisper. You're welcome. When he disappeared into the darkness, Laura lingered for a moment longer, listening. The sound of the puppies inside had quieted again, replaced by the slow rhythm of their mother's breathing. She closed her eyes, the night air cool against her face. For the first time in a long while she felt it, the peace that comes not from rest, but from redemption. As she turned to lock the door, the faintest rumble of thunder rolled across the distance, not the kind that brings fear, but the kind that reminds you, storms end. Inside, a soft bark echoed once more, playful, alive, full of promise. Laura paused, smiling to herself. Good night, Rexy, she whispered, and thank you for reminding us how to listen. The screen would fade slowly to black as the chorus of crickets and distant thunder blended with the soft whimpers of new life inside. A quiet, lingering reminder that miracles never truly end. They just ripple, from one heartbeat to another. You know, stories like this remind us of something simple but easy to forget. That love doesn't always speak our language. Sometimes it comes on four legs, with eyes that understand more than words ever could. German shepherds, especially, have that rare mix of loyalty and heart, the kind that stands by you through every storm and quiet morning after. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt that wordless bond, that quiet trust, then you already know what this story is really about. It's not just about rescue, it's about connection. About the healing that happens when two lives choose each other. If you'd like to learn ways to deepen that same bond with your own dog, there's a resource I've found comforting and helpful. Nothing fancy, just real guidance from people who care. You can check it out if you feel called to. And whether you do or not, take a moment tonight to give your dog an extra pat, a longer walk, a softer word. They may not understand everything you say, but they'll always understand love.